Hey there guys, today we're back with a video about one of the more controversial pack premium aircraft ever added to the game, the F-14D Super Tomcat. The few short weeks between this thing being announced and actually getting added to the live server have been an emotional roller coaster to say the least, and I'm sure many of you are wondering, how does this thing stack up now that the dust has settled? Well, there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is that for those of you who were hoping for a truly unique Tomcat variant that really shifted the playstyle of this vehicle compared to existing variants, that's not quite what we've got ourselves here. There's a lot of controversy about this, which I don't really care to weigh in on, but long story short, the argument could at least be made in principle that this aircraft could have been added to the game with AIM-120 AMRAAMs. No, this vehicle did not historically carry them, but it was a capability which was being tested and almost certainly would have been added to this airframe had it actually carried on in service, sort of like how the F-5C didn't carry flares in real life, but it was added to the game with them anyways. This would have made the Super Tomcat a very interesting 13.3 or 13.7 edition, giving it a distinctive playstyle from the F-14B at 13.0 and making it a bit more competitive at medium range against the premium flankers. Instead, what we've received is, for the moment at least, functionally identical to the F-14B, just with a slightly better radar. It does have a new version of the AIM-54, the AIM-54C+. However, at the time of this recording, the only difference between the C and the C+, is the fact that the C+, should allow for a bit more ordnance mixing on the underbelly due to its cooling system being stored internally. As a lot of you may know, I already have a full video about the F-14B, so you may be wondering what is even the point of me making this video if they're so similar. Well, that brings us to the good news. So, crazy coincidence, but right before the update dropped, Gaijin apparently just so happened to stumble across a bunch of secret documents which have informed them to make the F-14B and D way more offensively powerful. How convenient. First off, these two aircraft have finally been given AIM-9Ms, which is a massive step up in capability from the AIM-9Ls you previously relied on, which were basically useless against anyone who was actually aware of you. The other big change is the Phoenixes. The C Phoenixes are now lighter, pull more Gs, going up from 17 to 25, and are now subjected to a new mechanic in which their thrust will increase at higher altitudes due to the pressure there being lower. They say this feature will be implemented on all missiles in the future, but again, very conveniently, the new $80 premium vehicle gets it first. What all this means in practice is that the Phoenix is a much more dangerous weapon system than it was previously. What I'm sure you're all really wondering though is, how do you actually use this thing? Well, before I get into specifics, let me explain the reason behind why I'm going to advise you to play it this way. While you might hear some contrarians telling you that the Phoenixes are bad and that you should run a full Sparrow loadout, the fact remains the long range of the Phoenixes is pretty much your only competitive advantage in this aircraft, and if you don't at least attempt to pick off a few enemies early in the match, you're just not doing it right. That being said, most people tend to make two different major mistakes when using the Phoenixes in the early game. The first one is the fact that when you zoom climb, you get better overall range on your Phoenix launches, and this gives a lot of people the incorrect idea that they should be zooming up into space at the start of the match. The problem with this is, if you take too long, your window of opportunity to get a good shot off will have already closed, since the best possible opportunity you will ever get to hit someone with these things is when they're flying in a straight line towards the engagement area at the beginning of the match. So what you should be doing instead of trying to space climb is to close that distance as quickly as possible. My preferred strategy for this is to climb at about 15 degrees on full afterburner straight towards the enemy team, then drop down to about a 5-degree climb once I hit 5,000 meters in altitude. This will get you to a high enough altitude to get your Phoenixes some extra range, while also allowing you to close the distance with the enemy a lot faster than anyone on your team who's space climbing. And this brings me to the second mistake I see people make. A wise man once said, teammates are just enemies in blue, and that is especially true for the Tomcat. This is because even if you manage to get some good shots off, if your team composition looks like this, or if you have an Iranian Tomcat on your team, chances are, if there are any enemies who would make for easy targets for Phoenix launches, the chances are high someone else on your team will have hit them first. For that reason, here's how I like to strategize my launches. Assuming I'm one of only a few Tomcats on my team, I want to continue closing with the enemy and fire my Phoenixes at 40 kilometers distance at high-flying targets. And believe me, I tested a lot of different launch distances, but 40 kilometers seemed to be the magic number. You can hit people from further away than that if they're just not maneuvering or paying attention, but at 40 kilometers, that Phoenix is going to be coming in hot enough that they're going to have to put up a serious fight against it in order to counter it. However, if you find yourself yourself on a whole team full of Tomcats, what I would recommend doing is either skipping the first 4 or 5 closest high-flying enemies and aiming for the ones behind them, or firing at targets down on the deck. At this speed and altitude, a Phoenix shot from 25 kilometers has a pretty solid chance of getting a kill against a treetop level target, one because of the size of the Phoenix's warhead, but also because a lot of these people will probably not be expecting a Phoenix with so much energy behind it to hit them so early in the match. I know that might sound like a dangerously close distance, but honestly, I barely ever died while doing this as long as I had the discipline to peel off and start notching when the enemy got too close, even if I didn't get all of my Phoenixes off. The only exception to that was with the F-14D 90s, so if you see an Iranian flag on the enemy team, be a lot more cautious while doing this. While you're notching at this stage, I'd advise diving off to the left since a lot of your team will be out that way, and then you can start circling clockwise around the bases while looking for low-flying targets to engage with your AIM-9Ms. If you have any remaining Phoenixes, those can also be useful at this stage against low-flying enemies, though against enemies at altitude, my rule of thumb is that if they're within ACM range, they're probably too close to the Phoenix to effectively engage due to its slow acceleration. Now, to be clear, even if you fire a full volley of Phoenixes under ideal conditions, as I've described here, 1 kill is going to be about your average for this, and 4 is the most I've ever gotten 1 volley, but even so, I still recommend doing it this way. To better explain this though, I want to talk about the other radar missile you have access to, the AIM-7M. Long story short, it is absolutely dog shit at this BR, it accelerates slowly, it doesn't pull hard enough to hit aggressively maneuvering targets up close, and also has the lovely habit of just fucking off and not tracking the target even if you have a very solid lock on them. I spent a lot of time experimenting with loadouts of either 6 Phoenixes or 4 Phoenixes and 2 Sparrows, and I almost always ended up getting more kills overall when I was taking 6 good early game Phoenix shots as opposed to only 4, and then getting screwed over trying to force the Sparrows to work. If you are strongly of the opinion you want to take Sparrows, honestly, I would lean towards just taking 1 of them and then 3 AIM-9Ms. The AIM-9Ms are a drastically more effective missile at this battle rating, as a lot of premium noobs you fight don't have good situational awareness, and these things will very much punish you for that. And speaking of premium noobs, let's talk about your primary competition in this aircraft, the Su-30, both the Chinese and the Russian premium variants. Though your Phoenixes will massively outrange anything these vehicles carry, for short and medium range, the Super Tomcat just has absolutely no answer for weapons like the R-77, the R-27ER, or the PL-12. This is the reason why it's so important to get these vehicles on the back foot early. If you can keep these guys busy by putting a bunch of Phoenixes up in their face early in the game, that gives you an opportunity for your team to dash in and pick them off with your AIM-9Ms before they can properly retaliate. Keep in mind, these 13.3 Su-30s have a quite bad radar for BVR, so you'll definitely have a situational awareness advantage over them if the airspace is especially chaotic. If that doesn't work out though, I'll be honest, you're probably just going to get shafted. So overall, what do I think of the F-14D? Well, I think the biggest problem isn't really the aircraft itself, it's more so the matchmaker. Like, if you hypothetically had a mixed team of F-14Ds and F-16 ADFs against a team of flankers, I think it would be a pretty even fight. The problem is, when you have a whole team heavily comprised of F-14Ds, a lot of them will inevitably be wallet warriors who expend their Phoenixes way too early, hit nothing, return to base to rearm, and in the meantime, the enemies just swarm in and kill all their outnumbered teammates. Again, this aircraft just does not have an answer for the Eastern radar missiles at close to medium range, so unless these aircraft are properly supported by AMRAAM-equipped teammates, there's just not a whole lot they can do. I really wish we could have seen an AMRAAM-equipped version of the Tomcat at 13.3 or 13.7. The flankers would still have an advantage up close, but with the AMRAAM, it would at least have some ability to fight back. I think in the state of the current matchmaker, the Super Tomcat is going to be a bit of a more noob-friendly option compared to the premium Hornet, but it's by no means the brain-dead meme machine the Persian Tomcat is. I was tending to get around 2 kills per match on average, with a few ace games here and there, though honestly once the premium hype dies down and there are fewer Tomcats around, I think this aircraft will actually perform a lot better since there will be fewer people competing for those Phoenix shots early game. Anyways guys, that's going to be all for this one. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the playlist in the description for more similar content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.